Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Mexican Football Podcast. This is El Rifado, aka Christian Diaz, coming to you from San Diego. I'm here with my wonderful co-host, El Sabio, Albert Perez. How are you, mi Sabio?
Hey, what's up? What's up, guys? Sorry, I'm only here by photo today, but it's a situation out of my hands. But I'm here. I'm here. I'm here. You can at least hear my voice.
I'm grateful to have you. Thank you. We've got a great episode in store. We're going to take a closer look at a league that's quietly becoming one of the biggest success stories in North American football. I mean, of course, Liga MX Femenil. And to help us understand this league, I have an expert, Eugene Rupiński. Thank you for joining us. How are you?
Doing well. Thanks for having me.
Pleasure's all mine. Thanks for coming. And I just wanted to hop right in about Liga MX. It's it's a fairly new league as far as leagues are concerned. It started around 2016. It's about 10 years now, and when it first launched, the conversation seemed to be focused on, can we afford a women's league? And today, it seems like the conversation is more focused along the lines of, how can we make this league more commercially independent? And so that mentality change, to me, shows real growth. And I'm wondering, Eugene, do you agree? And if so, where have you seen the biggest growth?
Absolutely. I think that, if you're looking at just success stories in soccer, men's soccer, women's soccer, anywhere around the globe, I think Liga MX Femenil has to be one of the biggest ones that, at least that I know of. 10 years ago, they started right about this time with a cup competition with 12 teams. And now it is, a fully formed and functioning league with they recently said that they had the highest viewership numbers of any league in the world. That's better than WSL in England, better than NWSL, which is wild. So it's just such a wonderful success story, and to have it happening in Mexico is just super cool, right?
Yeah, 100%. That growth sounds extraordinary. It sounds like a success story for sure. And I just wanted to follow up and ask you, where do you think the league needs to work? I mean, what do you think the league needs to work on?
Sure. So, to get into it a little bit, this is very much a league of teams that are haves and have-nots, but more so the teams that are putting in effort and teams that aren't putting in effort. Okay, there are teams like Tigres, like America, like Rayadas, like Pachuca that are putting in money, putting in the work, putting in the work to scout players and bring in good players, and putting in the money and effort to support this. And then there are teams, just quite simply, who aren't. So I think that's what really needs to get worked on, is just incentivizing the teams that are sort of mailing it in, to really try and step up their efforts, and I don't know that it's necessarily totally a financial issue. I think for some clubs it is a financial issue. I mean, if they're struggling financially on the men's side, they're going to struggle financially on the women's side as well. But I still think that there are teams that can step up and do more than the bare minimum that they kind of are getting away with now.
I think that's a great response. Thank you for that, Eugene. But can I get names? Who's not footing the bill? Who's fallen short?
Sure. I hate to call out clubs by name, because every club is going through something different, right? But Necaxa is one of the teams that I think can stand for more investment, more force, I guess, behind their women's program, right? They tout the American Investing group with Rob McElhenney and Eva Longoria and all that kind of stuff. But their women's team has never had a winning season. They are They're one of the few teams that hasn't never made the playoffs, never had a winning season. It's just very difficult to kind of see that. I think clubs like Santos obviously are having financial issues with the men's side as well. So they kind of get a pass, but it's also, you know, I kind of as a fan, I have to sit back and go, get your house in order, right? Get out
I
there with
agree,
another team
but
that's like that too, right? So
I agree, but the thing is that you mentioned Santos and Necaxa, and those are both very small markets. Torreon, as well as the city of Aguascalientes is where Necaxa plays, and Necaxa is even more precarious because they used to be in the Ciudad de Mexico, and then they made the move to Aguascalientes, and I don't know if they ever took root to that place. I don't see the support that I see with a team like Cruz Azul or Chivas, even, which is like history, deep roots in an area. Necaxa doesn't quite have that, so I think that might be affecting these two clubs that you mentioned. Like they just don't have the financial resources, or they haven't utilized the market in a way for them to be as financially successful as some of these other clubs. You
Eugene, I have
know,
a question.
yes.
Eugene, so what's the name? So going on what Rifado was saying about these clubs in general, not growing roots, and not really not really connecting with the markets. Since the Liga MX Femenil recently they went independent, and the men's club are no longer required to have women's teams. How do you see that? Do you think we're gonna see the disappearance of a Necaxa Femenil, of a Juarez Femenil, which Juarez is on the selling block as well? But on the positive side, do you think there's going to be investment for new clubs to emerge?
So I want to take it back a step and say first off that as far as my understanding that the league is still dependent on the men's teams. Like the men's and women's clubs are not independent from one another, nor is the league. I think
All
that
right.
that's something that they are considering
Okay.
working toward. But my understanding is that it is not a fully independent league, right? So if, for instance, promotion and relegation comes back and Necaxa's men's team goes down, or whomever, Puebla's men's team goes down, or whatever, I think the women's team would go down because that's what we saw prior with the league when, for instance, Veracruz went down and Lobos Buap kind of disbanded, right? So we've seen that happen, and I think that would happen again still because these are things. But that being said, I think that there are a lot of reasons for these clubs that are not doing as well as I think that they should to be doing that. I think the fan support is one. I think the financial situation is another. And I think that there are ways that teams can overcome those boundaries and issues. We talk about Santos, small market, but their men's team forever had a great system. They had a lot of homegrown players. They would sell on players to make money, to bring in revenue to the club. The Torreon, the town loves it. I went there in 2019 and, just would be out and walking through the streets and saw people wearing Santos jerseys and stuff like that. So there are ways to get around that, but I think you have to apply those same kind of principles to the women's side as well. You have to have an idea, have work within your means, and be able to execute that, even if times don't go well. And you can't just throw it to the side and go, well, this isn't worth it, right? So I just think that there's a lot. I think there's a lot of underlying issues, and I hate kind of saying, well, this team should invest more because I don't know that that's always the case. Obviously, systemically, if we're talking, women's sports has always been undervalued and underfunded, and I think that that's true in Mexico as well, and I think that's even true at some of the bigger clubs. So it's not necessarily just a financial issue. I think it's just an issue where these teams need to just do more and do, you know, be professional about it, right?
So you would say that the small market um, counter is like null. Like we shouldn't apply it. It's more nuanced than that.
I don't think it's null, but I do think it's more nuanced than that. I think you can have a small market team like a Santos, like a Puebla, like a Necaxa, that can do things the right way, that can, you know, invest in youth academies. I mean, you know, think of what Santos does with their men's team, you know, or did for years. They poured all sorts of money and you know, resources into building an academy that was really second to none. Think of all the players that came up through men's players that came up through Santos's academy, right?
Yeah, their training
And
facilities
then
are
got
probably the best in Mexico.
Eugene,
exactly, and you know they would play for the club. The club would do very well. They would sell those players off. They also did very good at scouting, bringing in players from Uruguay, bringing in players from Colombia, bringing in players from wherever, having them come to Mexico, have a couple of good years, selling them on to Tigres, to America. I mean, look at like a guy like Gorriarán, right? On the men's side, brought him in from Hungary, had him there for a couple of years, sold him. He's now been with Tigres forever. You know, so you can take that kind of same model and apply it to the women's game, but it's going to require investment up front. It's going to require investing in your U19 girls program. It's going to require investing in even some of the youth programs in the area, because right now for the men, they still have the U13s, U15s. Women don't have that. They just have the U19s and then the first team, right? So it's going to be investing in that. And it's hard to do that. And I get it. It's hard. If you're running a business, it's hard to do that and not seeing any return on that for a long time. And it would be a long time before a team like Santos or Puebla or whoever would be able to see that return on their investment. But I think if you look at where women's sports is now, where women's sports was 10 years ago, as far as transfer fees, as far as salaries, and where it is going to be in the next 10 years, you know, that sort of investment, if you put that in now, will pay dividend.
I see. So, I'm so glad you mentioned salaries. So salary caps are gone, right? Clubs are investing at different levels, like you said, some more than others. Are we starting to see a league where financial ambition is separating the contenders from everyone else? Like Tigres, they on Jornada 1, I forgot who they beat. They beat someone 8-0, right? Like they obviously are one of the best. They're probably the flagship
I,
team,
I
right?
mean, Rifado,
Go ahead.
when you look at the list of the league is going on 9 years already. When you look at the list of champions, we only have what's the name, 5 champions, and the ones with the most are Tigres and Monterrey. Tigres at 7, Monterrey has 4, then America, which is they're coming up, is 3, Chivas has 2, then Pachuca had 1 last year, but you know what? It's Eugene is you talk about how the other teams need to step up, but even if they did, do you see the reign of a Tigres and a Monterrey being contested?
Yes, yes. I think there are some teams that are on on the bubble, if you will, that can, if they can put it all together, can threaten Tigres, Monterrey, that, right? So we mentioned Juarez. You mentioned that they were on the chopping block. Their women's program has actually done a lot of the things that I was talking about. They've invested, right? They were one of the first to bring in a sporting director, specifically for the women's side.
That's cool.
They make a lot of smart signings, right? Toluca's another one that has kind of done that, where they really a few years back took a look at their women's program and decided to invest. You know, they brought in Amandine Henry, which was unheard of, right? You don't bring who brings in world class talent like that? Well, Toluca did, and Toluca's been able to build on that. They've got a really good team. They've been able to put together some postseason runs. Haven't quite gotten over the hump yet, but you know, that's another team that that really kind of took a look at themselves and said, what do we need to do to play in the same league with Tigres and Rayadas and America, who were, just dumping in gobs and gobs of money and gobs of resources. And they went out and have done that. It is not an impossible thing to do. Some
So
clubs
so
executed
you're
on that
you're
better
saying
than
that
others. I think that, we will see a new team, maybe not a new team, but like, a Toluca, a Juarez, maybe a Cruz Azul, if there is a God, Pumas, coming up and having, breaking that cycle and getting their names on a trophy as well.
so you're saying right now that it is top heavy, but there's people or there's teams in the middle of the pack that are growing and challenging the reigning champs in Monterrey or the
Absolutely.
Regio teams. Good to
Absolutely. I
hear. Good to
think
hear.
that's one of the things that makes it so exciting for me, is that, yeah, there is a top class of 5 to 6 teams, right? And then there is a middle class, if you will, of some teams, and then there are the teams at the very bottom who just, need to put it together. But I think that's exciting. I think it makes it a lot more exciting than a 2-team league like you have in Spain, right, where it's Barcelona and Real Madrid and everybody else. It's
Eugene,
actually one.
talking of
It's
so
Barcelona.
Eugene, talking about that top class, tell me, how important was that America win in the female Conca champions where they beat an American team? I was reading that it was pretty significant. I mean, uh, what could you tell us about what that means for the Liga MX Femenil?
I think it means the world for Liga MX Femenil. I think because of, because of the dynamic between women's soccer in the US and women's soccer in Mexico, right? Women's soccer in the US is a juggernaut. The women's national team is inarguably one of the best in the world, if not the best, on any given week. NWSL is pretty inarguably the best league in the world. You have the robust college NCAA system, which just churns out player after player after player. And it was very easy to kind of go, Mexico doesn't have their stuff together. Look at the women's national team. What have they done? Look at, the league is kind of this, and then to have America come up and really not just eke out a win against Gotham, but to beat them and beat them quite handily.
And Gotham's a
I think
major team. I saw that. I saw that a couple weeks ago. They filled up City Field with 45,000 fans. So it's they're big time in the women's world.
Yeah, yeah. And I think it means the world. I think, somebody like me who's been watching this league since its inception, and even some of the people who are real, like, watchers of the league and ball knowers and all that, whatever you want to say, like, could kind of see this coming. But I think if you are, somebody in England or whatever that covers WSL and doesn't think much of anything, you see this and go, wait, what is this Liga MX Femenil? Like, what is this Mexican team doing? It really puts them on the map. It puts America on the map. It puts the league on the map. It puts the players on the map. And I think excuse me, I think when you couple that with Mexico beating the U.S., women's, a couple of years ago or last year, you're seeing this sort of shift away from the U.S. teams and leagues being indestructible to actually having to pay attention to what is going on in Mexico. I think that means the world, and then you get the players that are coming in to the NWSL from Liga MX. You get Jackie Ovalle, who's playing with Orlando now. You get Rebecca Bernal, who's now playing in Washington, and both of them are doing well. I just think this really means the world to this league. It is proof that this goofy idea that came about in 2015 and 2016 wasn't that goofy of an idea. It's actually provided real opportunities and benefits, and it's wonderful to see.
Great insights. I just wanted to follow up on that, Eugene. We were talking about like significant moments, right? So Mia Villalpando turned down a full scholarship at UCLA to stay at Tigres. How significant is that decision for Liga MX Femenil's reputation?
If we're talking strictly about the soccer, I think that is a great move forward for the league, right? I will say personally, I may have opted to go to college just because you get a college education, but that is a different topic for a different time, I suppose. I think
But isn't Tigres also a university? I'm pretty sure it is. So
so they are, but I don't know if they. I think they're like Pumas, where they are owned by the university, but I don't know if there's any. I don't know if like Mia could go to
I think
UAML.
so. I think so. I know the Pumas players can, and I know Tigres is technically like Pumas.
Okay,
So
then
I don't.
then that might work out even better for her.
Yeah, yeah.
I think just sticking to the sporting aspect of it, I think she's going to get a lot more from Tigres than she would at an American college, even a great one like UCLA. And that's no slight to UCLA, but the professional regimen that she is going to go through. When you think of all of the, Tigres is one of those teams that has the resources, right? They have nutritionists, they have um, dedicated workout regimens, they have, all of this stuff that you think of in like modern professional football. They have that. Not to say that UCLA doesn't, but you're also, you know, getting this exposure. You're playing in front of thousands of people at the Uni, right? You're playing against some of the best players in the world. Like we talked about, she's going to get to play against Amandine Henry and Faustine Robert when they play against Toluca. She's going to get to play against, or she's going to get to play with Jenny Hermoso. Like that's wild. Like as good as UCLA is, she's not going to get to play against or with those sorts of players. You know?
I love that. To me, it signals growth. Like for so long, I forget how many World Cups the women's the U.S. women's side has, but I know they have more, two at least. But for so long, they relied solely on the university system,
Mm-hmm.
and then they launched their own league, and that was always like, I don't know. I want to say the flagship. I want to say like the one of the best programs in the whole world, and for like a woman to choose Liga MX Femenil over that, to me shows tremendous growth. So I, for one, love that, and I hope that we continue to bring in stars and grow financially. But where do you think the investment's going to come from? There's talks about separating them. Like separating them from the men's side. How are these women gonna like find the investment needed to not only survive but thrive?
That is an excellent question. And, the Liga MX Femenil, we keep calling it that. It actually recently, as in the past couple of weeks, rebranded. It is now officially Liga Femenil. Okay. The branding has been updated and they have made a commitment to broadcast more games, to put out, so I think the league and the teams are doing a lot of the things that are going to help bring in that investment. Okay. When we talk about investment, where does that money come from? When a team can invest in its players, it can invest in its facilities. Where does that money come from? It all comes from sponsors. It all comes from television rights. It all comes from those sorts of things. And when you have a professional product, when you have a professional league, when you have professional players, it is that much easier to market. It's much easier to go to a brand and say, you want to get in on it. Okay, look at our league, look at and it's all these things that we've kind of like touched on, right? Most watched women's soccer league in the entire world. Name one. It's better than that. It's got more viewers than that one. Okay. Players that are choosing to come from the United States, opting to go not to college like Mia Villalpando and go to Tigres, opting not to play with Orlando like me official and play for Tigres, right? And then you have it going the other way. You have players that have played in Liga MX Femenil that then go on to NWSL and get, can expose the league and its players to more sets of eyes in the US. It is a league that basically straddles both countries because it is broadcast legally in both countries, right? It has so many advantages that teams and the league and players and their agents and everybody can kind of go to brands and say, look at all this exposure. Look at this product. Look at what you can invest in. If you put some of your money in this for advertising, you will get it back because people are paying attention. And I think, the league has done such a good job in positioning itself to that. And it's just capitalizing on all of that.
I think that's a great answer. The thing is though, is that you were talking about like selling it to these sponsors, right? And I'm not sure how it works, but I know the men's side is very fragmented. It's everyone goes their own way. Everyone is the captain of their own ship, and everyone has a different deal. Is the women's side like that as well?
Yes. Yes. So
Do you think that's a detriment?
that's a great question and something that I field often. It's, I started watching a team. I don't know. I started watching Juarez. How do I watch their games? If I'm living in the U.S., sometimes it's on this channel. Sometimes it's I have to find a stream, and it's all because it's set up like the men, right? The men teams, the women's teams, they sell their rights to whomever, right? So obviously America is from Televisa. That's why it's on VIX. That's why it's on TUDN sometimes here in the U.S. That's why it's on Televisa in Mexico, right? Other teams do that. So other teams are in charge of that. Now there was talk with this last kind of reorganization, the kind of rebranding, where they were talking about centralizing everything under the league, right? So going from the way that it is now more to like what NWSL, MLS, American sports does, where the league is the one that sells the rights and kind of does that. And I'm not exactly sure how that's going to work. I don't know that they know exactly how that's going to work.
I would love for that to happen. And then
I
I
would
would
love
love for that to inspire the men's to do that as well. Because I
it,
for one, am sick of having, I don't know, 4 different streaming services to watch every Liga MX game. I think it's crazy. I think it's detrimental to the growth of not just the women's side, but the men's side as well. So I would love to see that change.
I think we will see that, especially on the women's side. And I kind of hate to say it, but I think sometimes they use the women's side as a little bit of a guinea pig to try things out on for the men's side. So I think that we will see, hopefully within the next few years, the league being able to package rights, at least internationally, if not domestically, sell them, because that's really how you get money. That's how you get the investment from other countries, is you can sell a package deal for rights to say, hey, I don't know, Portuguese broadcasting company, we'll sell you the rights to our games for this, and you can broadcast them in Portugal, whatever. Sure, cool. Give us your money. You know what I mean?
I do, and I just want to follow up one quick question. What do you think is the biggest challenge that's holding us back? Is it this, or is it something else? Because I think it's this, but I'd love to hear your opinion.
Biggest challenge, I think there are still significant challenges that face the league. I know I've been very almost a cheerleader because there is just a lot to celebrate. There's a lot of things to celebrate, how far this league has come in the past 10 years. But there are still significant hurdles. I think, obviously the TV rights and getting those sold internationally, I think is one of them. I think with the boom that you're seeing in women's soccer, that sort of thing is really just ripe for, getting resources out of, putting things into and getting it out of. And then I think it's really, once you get that, it's having, those sorts of long, hard conversations with the teams at the bottom to help them figure out how they can be more competitive. Because, you know, you I don't think I think a league is strongest when all of the teams can compete. Maybe you still have a handful that are better than the rest, right? That will maybe Tigres and Rayadas in America will always be the best because they will always have infinitely more money to dump into things than other teams. But it would be good for a team like Puebla to not get pounded 8-0. You know what I mean? And to have them have an opportunity to come out and do an upset against Tigres, which I don't, just looking at it now, I don't think they can. So I think once you get that sort of those bottom teams getting kind of lifted up, I think that in addition to having more money brought in, I think that will help make the league more attractive, and that would then further bring in more sponsorships and more TV rights and all that kind of stuff.
I see. One last question. Now, this one is it might be a little controversial or just a little bit different. And I just want to ask, what does the growth of Liga MX Femenil mean for the feminist movement in Mexico? Which has a long history of machismo. What has it done in that aspect?
Sure. And let me start by saying this, that I'm a white guy. I'm a white man. I live in America. I'm an American, right? So I don't know fully on the ground what the feminist movement in Mexico is, what it needs, right? Like I have a general understanding, but I am by no means an expert in that. So starting off by saying that, I think that anytime that you have a venue, an opportunity for women to show themselves as their whole selves, as being powerful and strong and being able to do amazing things, that can only help not only push forward a feminist movement, but also help blunt some of the machismo, right? I think one of the most powerful things that I see often when I'm watching games is both the little girls in the stands cheering for their favorite players and the little boys in the stands cheering for their favorite players. Because these boys that are 5 years old, 10 years old, they're going to grow up watching these women do their thing. They're going to grow up watching these women do magical things, right? Things that we see soccer players do and make us fall in love with the game. And I think that these little boys are going to see that, and the little girls too, and they're going to go, this is what women can do. And this is, and if you're a little boy and you see that, I think that lessens the chance of you objectifying women later on, seeing them only as sex objects, treating them like dirt, being violent against them. If you see that at a young age, then that gives you more of a window, and it starts you younger, that that sort of thing is unconscionable.
I love that response. I think that's great. And I appreciate the humility as well. Here we are, men, talking about, the women's sports, and, I'm sure there's plenty of women who could tell us more, and we're gonna feature them more. We've had, some people on already, and we're gonna feature more of them. But I do appreciate that Eugene, that response. It was it was very insightful. I I appreciate this whole interview. But where can our listeners find you? What's your handle, and what podcast are you on, or where are you writing now?
Gotcha. So yeah, I'm just kind of doing my own thing at the moment. I am freelancing for myself. Really, I have a beehive, a newsletter, and I am on Golazo del Gringo on Blue Sky. I don't do Twitter anymore, but I'm on Blue Sky. I still post there as frequently as I can, which isn't too often lately, unfortunately for me. But yeah, I mean, if you're hearing me for the first time, I'd love to have you follow me. Yeah, check out Golazo del Gringo on Beehive. I do post how to watch Liga MX Femenil games. I try and do a news roundup periodically for Mexico and the world. And anytime something really kind of strikes my fancy going on in Liga MX Femenil, I try and write about that as well.
Great to hear. Great to hear. And thank you for coming once again. I do appreciate it. Let's go ahead and wrap this up. Give you a round of applause. Thank you so much, Eugene.
Yeah, thank you for coming, Eugene.
I just want to say thank you, and thank you to Albert for having me on and for the wonderful questions. It's been a privilege to be here. I appreciate it so much.
No worries. Thank
Pleasure's
you again.
all ours. So that's a wrap.